So welcome, Malin. You're studying in Scotland, right? Would you mind telling us something about yourself?
Well, I've actually moved to Serbia, so I'm having a lot of trouble unlearning Polish and relearning Serbian at the moment because the words are far too close. So I keep telling people, unfortunately, that I'm on the street, droga, which means drugs. So I always tell people I'm on drugs, and asking for no cheese in my sandwich, which unfortunately is ser, not ser. So I've literally been telling people no shit in my sandwich. Thank you very much. So aside from the problems of unlearning language, yeah, doing fairly well with software in Serbia. So I want to do a presentation on software, which seems like just the thing for sci-fi.
Okay, let's get started.
Cool. So the first bit, I'm going to explain slightly weird theory, but it's popular at least. People like thinking about this theory. And this is David Chalmers and Clark's extended mind theory. So apologies to Clark, I could not find a picture of him. Maybe he's a very private person. But this is very much Chalmers here. So the idea is that the mind exists inside objects. It's not all that crazy. So basically, if you're a scientifically minded person and somebody asks, where is my mind, as the Pixies have asked, you would say, well, it's here, in the brain. That's where the mind is, because it's like supervening on it or something like that. Whatever way you use to flesh this out, the mind is located at the brain. Unless, of course, you get a bit of dementia, or you're just very forgetful like me, and I have to carry around this notebook and write down addresses. Now, it looks at the first glance like this is just a prosthetic, it doesn't matter, that my mind is my brain, and then I look at this and I remember where my friend's address is. However, if you're constantly using this stuff, then you might start to say that your beliefs reside in here. Let's say I write down my friend's address and you ask me, where do I believe my friend lives? I would open the notebook and look up the address. And I genuinely believe what's in here. But my belief doesn't like disappear the moment I close the notebook just because I happen to be forgetful. My belief is located here, which suggests that part of my mind is inside the notebook in a very real sense. So yeah, minds can be in objects. This looks like a bit of a funny example. Back in, I think it was the 80s or 90s, they first proposed this theory. The theory gets a lot stronger nowadays because we have the phones. So if you've got, as Chalmers is talking about, an iPhone, part of your mind may be said to be in the iPhone. This isn't about looking things up on Facebook. The idea is that if your memory resides in the iPhone, if your beliefs reside in the iPhone, your ability to calculate, that's the thing minds do, they calculate, they do sums. If you are used to doing those sums on the iPhone, then your mind is literally in the iPhone in a very real sense. And this is also partly meant to be explanatory as to why it can feel quite so nasty and violating when these objects are taken away from us. If you've got like wonderful golden jewels and they're stolen, then that's a shame, but it's not exactly the same as when your phone gets stolen. If your phone is stolen, you don't have a backup, then there's something deeply violating about it. It's like when you lose a bunch of data, it's like your memories have been ripped away, your abilities have been stripped. Your mind constantly reaches out to a thing which is just no longer there. So parts of the mind have, in a very real sense, disappeared. So, I'm not exactly here to defend Chalmers' theory. I'm just going to take that as a given, or rather say, if that's true, then a bunch of other stuff follows from it. So, what follows from it? If a mind can reside in something that's running software, and all software can come under a license, I think that's fairly obvious, then it logically follows that parts of a mind can come under a license. Maybe not the entire thing, maybe the entire thing, but certainly a part of the mind can come under a license. That is, part of somebody's mind can be owned by somebody else. So somebody else can have property rights over that mind. So my mission from this point on is just to say scary things and hope it hits home. I'm also going to be talking a bit later about the problems with auditing and self-reflection. So if I have some bias or some bigotry, we've all got some bigotries, but I have the ability to reflect on my bigotries and think, well, why am I bigoted towards this group or that group of people, or about anything else in the world? I can think, okay, is that a good bias to have? Maybe I am a bit bigoted, and maybe I get to sort it out. But if that part of the mind is running on software, and the software cannot be audited, it cannot be inspected, it cannot be looked at, then you cannot get over this bias. You cannot relieve your own bigotries or inclinations because you can't inspect them. So I pulled up some sort of sci-fi, I think sci-fi examples to just go over the worst case scenario, because of course, just as the notebook made this not terribly obvious, it was a bit fiddly, but the phone, that made it really obvious. If we look into the future, maybe not the future, if we look into more extreme technological development, then it could be a lot easier to understand the kind of dangers that you could potentially face. So that's where we look at RoboCop here. I hope everyone's roughly familiar with RoboCop. It was, I'm not showing my age too much. It was a remake a bit ago. Yeah, RoboCop he partly runs on software. We can see he has directives here. Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, etc., etc.
OCP defines you as a machine that utilizes some living tissue. You understand that?
Yes.
And so, do you consider yourself human? I require an answer. Stop tape. You have any idea what you're doing to that poor woman? Take a look at her file. Go on.
Officer, Mrs. Murphy is bringing suit against OCP. My name is Tom Delaney. I'm representing her. Up to a few months ago, she wouldn't leave her bedroom. Then there were the therapists and the hypnotists and the harmonic treatments.
And then you pull this shit. Driving past her house day after day. Trying to make her think her husband is still alive.
She's barely started to accept the loss. You're ripping her to pieces.
And for what? Do you think you could ever be a husband to her? I mean...
Hit the gas, Murphy.
So, a couple of points to note there. OCP, so RoboCop's going to visit his dead wife. His wife, and he's meant to sort of be dead. She's freaking out. Now OCP are apparently criminally liable. For what? This is RoboCop's doing, right? Except he's licensed. At least enough of his mind is licensed to them that they could actually be criminally liable for their creation. And you can see that's how they view this person. A robot with some organic pieces. So he doesn't have full control over his mind. Because somebody runs his software, because somebody else owns his software, that's, they just have full control over the thing. He also has some directives. Now, at the start, he's kind of okay with the directives. He used to be a good police officer, and he was quite happy with this. But then we get this other nonsense later, which is exactly the kind of nonsense you can get when, you get large corporations pulling this kind of nonsense.
RoboCop's command program, his set of directives, it determines his behavior. It's time to update the program, and I would like to hear from each one of you. It's about time they asked us.
Well, we're getting a lot of heat, and I mean a lot of it from the parents' groups. And personally, I don't blame them. I'm a parent myself.
All that destructive behavior. He's become a role model for our children. Now, what are we teaching them?
You have a point.
If he just talked things out with people instead of firing that big gun of his.
Couldn't he take a little time to address environmental issues?
Excuse me, what was that?
He could speak out on environmental issues.
Don't see any reason why not.
For all the shooting he does, I've never once seen him take the time to do anything nice. Like, visit an orphanage.
You're absolutely right. Or help a cat out of a tree, or or go door to door collecting for the Red Cross, or maybe even roasting some marshmallows with some Cub Scouts.
Why, Mr. Johnson, that is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, the program isn't uploading.
So this should be fairly familiar.
There's too much data.
No, it's him.
Always a bit of a fight. What happens when this happens? This is what happens. You got work to do, you got stuff you want to get done, all of a sudden, we've got updates for you. Surprise! You got to stop what you're doing, and sometimes you have to change your workflow. Now, admittedly, it's not quite as bad for me having to work on this ridiculous operating system, Windows, as it is for Robocop, because he's like literally being dragged around by the brain here. However, yeah, this is more than an analogy. I want to like stretch out the idea that this is the thin end of the wedge. That you have a thinking machine in front of you which forms part of your mind. And if you didn't have your to-do lists, you'd probably be much less organized than you are. Or if you didn't have a messenger of some kind, you would probably be much less capable of remembering the conversations that you've had with people. And so the end result, ridiculous updates, stopping working because this isn't about computers, it's about having the locus of your mind outside your mind, because we are very good at taking care of ourselves and knowing what we want. But random third-party entities, these are not very good at taking care of us and knowing what we want. The end results.
Oh my. This isn't very nice. Though you may think you're having fun now, you only hurt the one you love. Think of Mom and Dad. What kind of lesson are you teaching them? And now, a word on nutrition.
Shit, he's fucked up.
Bad language makes for bad feelings.
Let's go.
The point is, we all have to work. I haven't finished.
Yeah. So there's Windows updates or OCP updates in the flesh, operating inside somebody's mind. Now, the auditing bit is a little more insidious. It's a little trickier. As I said before, some parts of the mind, if they're running software, they just cannot be audited, because if you can't see the source code of the software, you have no idea what this thing is doing. I've got no idea what Zoom is doing. I've got a rough idea what Zoom is doing. But if any of this wanted to sort of track files, look at which ports are open on my computer, see how I'm thinking about things, it's totally capable of that. So enter Nosedive. So this sort of thing is more relevant to Facebook. Now, I'm not talking about messages or privacy. It's not exactly about that. This is about the way we internally rate people socially. When you go around the world, you might see people and be like, I like this person, don't like to look at that person, this person's rubbish, she's interesting. We do this naturally all the time. We're social animals, and here we have an app that will do it for you. No longer do you have to figure out if somebody's a nice or a bad person. You got an app. It's going to tell you who's a nice person and who's a nasty person.
And that's one brush sweep. You want a cookie with that? It's on the house.
Sounds awesome. See you tomorrow, JJ.
See you, Lacey.
Oh, saw your boy in the fire hat just now. So cute.
Yeah, he's really something.
So, there's the social rating. Guy serving the coffee, not an amazing human, he's only 3.7. Everyone with coffee, drinking coffee, they're all like 4s and stuff. They're wonderful people. Now, of course, you might think you could just reject that, you could just ignore it. But I suggest this is probably not the case. If you are constantly like getting this feedback in your face, it's going to adjust your thinking sooner or later. And if you start to reject this system, that's going to have a bit of a feedback effect. So, just to recapture, the parts of these people's minds that socially rates people have been replaced with an app, and there's no way to alter this. We see this time and time again in the series. Nobody gets explanations. They just get a bunch of Facebook-style posts. There's no reason for some people to be accepted and rejected more. So this is something that's already happening a bit in the real world. You can see, for example, some Facebook posts will be more seen than others. Just having a bit more information there about something, this is going to affect people. I stuck a bit of a rant on Facebook as I was leaving, and it was fairly plain to me that I didn't know how many people were going to see that. And if Facebook wanted to just have an algorithm that says any negative comment about Facebook, it's got to be lowered. There's no way to audit it. So you have no idea what your own social rating is, why it's there, or anything else. You can't ask people.
Of quality, you could use a punch-up right there. Ideally, that up.
Who are these quality people?
Quality people.
Quality people.
High fours. Impress those upscale folks, you'll gain velocity on your arc, and there's your boost.
Yeah, they look like awful people to me. And we have the flip side here. Danger, danger.
Look like you need a ride.
Actually, I'm okay.
Don't look it. Come on. I don't bite.
Oh my god, a 1.4. What an awful human. Probably a psychopath. But again, all this ability is taken away. Oh, you've got plenty more real-world examples of this already, like slowly and creepily coming in. Twitter doesn't explain what verified versus unverified means. You get special people, and they're good people, and they're verified. And it sounds like it means that Twitter has identified that this person is the person who they say they are, but it doesn't. They apply this in fairly arbitrary ways. They even apply it to like non-accounts, which isn't meant to be a particular thing. Like I think We Rate Dogs has been verified. It's like, what is that verified as? They really rate dogs? We know they do, because there's pictures of dogs and they give them scores. But there's no way to audit why Twitter behaves in this way and not that way. There's another example. Go to Google Translate, start swearing. Pick out another culture's most obscene swear words, and you'll find a sort of slightly toned down version. You can't figure out if something was a bit of a medium swear, or if Google Translate has just toned down things. Again, the point is not that this is bad, it's that we naturally translate with it's not that that's inherently bad, it's just that it's unauditable, which makes it bad. So the bit in your mind which usually translates things, as all of the Polish listeners here are, that's taken away, and you no longer get the ability to do that. Or if you want to look up moon landing hoax, you want to decide what's a hoax and what's not. You've got your own internal senses of how this works. Google will bias those results to give you anti-hoax theories. And again, that sounds very benevolent, it sounds great. The moon landing was not a hoax, it's ridiculous, but we can't see what else they're biasing. All we know is that they're changing what people think. They're changing minds. And the ordering that Google presents things in, 1 is the most important, the bottom is less important, page 2 doesn't exist. This forms part of people's internal rating system. We got some even subtler example here. Watch this. If you can spot the biggie.
You can speak now.
Det må have været roaches.
It must have been roaches.
Roaches, you see them? You see?
Jeg kan ikke se dem. Jeg kan høre dem.
I didn't see them. I heard them.
Og så har I også alt det råd.
All the mess.
Det må have været dem.
It must have been them.
Want a cookie? De har været i maden.
Here you go. They've been in the food.
Vi bliver nødt til at smide resten væk. Der er ingen, der vil spise det.
We'll have to destroy everything they left. No one will eat it.
We can replace that, okay?
We can erstatte det.
De har ødelagt køleren, splittet den ad og taget indholdet.
They destroyed the cooler, broke it, and took the parts.
The cooler, they stole parts from the cooler.
Køleren, de stjal dele fra køleren.
Which way did they go?
Hvilken vej gik de?
Der er fodspor i jorden derovre. De må være gået den vej der.
There were footprints in the dirt leading that way.
Pan Heidegger. Pan Heidegger.
Heidegger is that a name?
Et navn.
Stop them coming. Please, you must stop.
The soldiers can't translate. One of them can translate. Now, the soldiers would have no need of learning any second language because they have a language translating device. Except for that one word, Heidegger, I should have made more effort to find out exactly what was being said there. I'm not sure if this is a made-up language. It sounds something Scandinavian. So if anyone knows, I'd love to know in the question and answer bit. Point here is, the bit of your head that does the translating has been replaced with a prosthetic. It's still part of the mind. They're still losing the ability to translate once they lose the tech. But they don't have the ability to audit it. The tech, part of their own mind, can just suddenly say, I'm not translating that. I don't think you should be hearing this stuff. And we don't know why. Maybe it failed. Maybe there's something more insidious. Again, it is completely immune to any kind of introspection.
First, the screening program, the DNA checks, then the register, the emergency measures. And soon everyone calls us creatures, filthy creatures. Every voice, the TV, the computer, say we have sickness in us. We have weakness. It's in our blood. They say that our blood cannot go on, that we cannot go on. My name was Katerina. He was Alec. Now we're just Roach.
So, yeah, there's the big reveal. It's season 3, episode 5 in Black Mirror. There are people who are being hunted, and they're not really roaches. They're ordinary people. The soldiers will perceive them differently. They will literally see horrible monsters when they're meant to be shooting these people. So that might sound like an eyeball modification, but eyeballs, if you study what eyeballs do, they don't pick up an awful lot of information, and you don't see half of what you think you see. Most of this visual data is processed in the brain. So if you can mess around with somebody's brain, that visual processing part, you've really done all the work that you need to do. Here, people who are genetically inferior are rebranded as cockroaches, and that makes it easier for the military to kill them. So it's a kind of visual translation happening here. And again, very much a part of the mind. Part of the mind with, of course, all the usual safeguards that this kind of software has. Terms and conditions apply, everyone agreed to it freely, etc., etc. It still goes very, very wrong. See the terms and conditions.
Stayed until mass came along. You see, mass, well, that's the ultimate military weapon. It helps you with your intel, your targeting, your comms, your conditioning. It's a lot easier to pull the trigger when you're aiming at the boogeyman. It's not just your eyes, though. It takes care of your other senses, too. You don't hear the shrieks, You don't smell the blood in the shit.
They're human beings.
Do you have any idea the amount of shit that's in their DNA? Higher rates of cancer, muscular dystrophy, MS, SLS, substandard IQ, criminal tendencies, sexual deviances. It's all there. The screening shows it. Is that what you want for the next generation? Don't feel bad about doing your job. The villagers won't do it. The folks back home won't do it. They don't have mass. Mass lets you do it. You're protecting the bloodline. And that, my friend, is an honor.
There's no honor here. Just killing. Lying and killing.
No one lied to you. You knew all of this. All along.
What are you talking about?
You agreed to have your mass implant put in. Set up. Every soldier does. You can't just embed it and feed you a dream. Your mind would reject it. You have to accept it. Willingly. That's exactly what you did.
So you see the terms and conditions there?
Yeah, that's like a whole essay, man.
What is that?
That's your consent video. From when you signed up 6 months ago.
Basically, it says you agree to mass implant activation.
Huh?
I didn't do this.
Yes, you
It's
did.
kind of like hypnosis.
Yeah, all right.
Part of what you're agreeing to is not realizing you've been put in this state. If you follow me, you won't recall this conversation.
Yo, that's kind of funny, man.
Turn it off.
So for you to register consent,
Turn it off,
put
man.
your thumbprint there.
All right here?
Yes, please.
Does that look familiar to anyone? Terms and conditions. Yeah, click I agree. Cool. Whatever. That's how you work with software. Click, click, click. Cool. Whatever you want. And it's insidious. I mean, the options here are like long, boring thing and not getting your stuff done. Or like, bang, click here, get your stuff done. Put your thumb in, click I agree. There we are. Somebody's in your mind. So the cost of this kind of free contract, the cost of this kind of licensing goes in your head. It's not simply, people talk about financial costs. They focus really hard on this. But the other costs are that inability to audit what's going on, the inability to see what you're really seeing once you accept these extended senses or this extra memory. So I don't want all this to be bad news. I could have, like last presentation, I did come up with, I wanted to do thousands and thousands of examples and run through them. There aren't thousands of examples. There are like, I found maybe 5 clear ones, so I just wanted to focus on the super clear ones. But broadly, it's just not a subject people are dealing with, as far as I can see. Anytime I've brought this up, people find like different eyeballs or modified bodies or things which are just not clearly part of somebody's mind whatsoever. Unlike mass, where you're the bit that processes information and the memory and all this stuff within Black Mirror there. The episode was Men Against Fire. That is a manipulation of the mind, as long as you accept the part of the mind resides inside software, or could do. But anyway, I thought I'd end up before questions on an up note. This is Stallman. He was freaking out about this stuff in the 70s and 80s. He sounded very silly at the time. And people were saying, why on earth are you going nuts about your printer driver? Just install the printer, it works fine. But he literally just, this entire thing happened because of a printer. He went nuts about not being able to audit a printer, and then he went nuts about all the other drivers. And eventually he said, screw you guys, I'm going to make you my own operating system, and it's going to be completely open. And nobody will ever have to worry what the computer is doing. So he took a bit of software from others, he made some agreements, he wrote a lot of this stuff himself, and whatever you do in life, you now use this software. It's on the back end. It runs your Facebook. It runs the switches that govern the internet. It's this guy's software that do all the heavy lifting. There's been almost no advertising on it, but it spreads because it works. It works better than everything else when it's open, and people get the ability to really see how it goes. Unfortunately, it's not great at grabbing money from people. It's great at being good, not at taking money from people. So he's got a whole write-up about exactly what like the terms and conditions are of freedom. So instead of just taking away a license, they had everything is licensed by default. So in order to take away licenses on software, they actually had to put in a license saying you're allowed to do anything you want, but you're not allowed to restrict other people's ability from seeing this. However, we have a summary. You don't need to read the entire GNU public license, as it's called. Here are the 4 freedoms. Like programmers, they count from 0 to 3. So freedom 0, the freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. Would have been great for Robocop. He could have rejected some of those other suggestions about lecturing kids on nutrition. Freedom 1, the freedom had to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. Access to the source code is a precondition for this. So even if that guy had his memory removed with mass, he at least should have had the ability to go into his own head and not rely on doctors and figure out what was changing things. Figure out what exactly the software was doing. Or if not figure out, at least have a README. Should have had a README file that tells him what's going on. Next up, freedom to redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor. Not sure I've seen anything that's relevant to that here. And freedom 3, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified version. That could have been interesting if with our social apps, people had been able to go, you know what, I'm not happy with this rating. I think you should get ratings where, only close friends and family actually matter. Or they could say, no friends and family matter. I don't like it. The fact that I hate my family has nothing to do with anything. I want to be rated on different things. Or maybe you could do a modified version where nobody can see your rating unless they have known you for a certain amount of time. So you don't get prejudices. You could try all sorts of things with this sort of software, except you can't here because it's completely closed source and proprietary. Or at least that is there's a strong indication of that from these episodes. So that's the theory. Just extend it can apply to software, and software can have licenses and everything you get from that. That's the lot. I'm seeing no comments, unless you need to be signed into Facebook to see comments. So can I open the thing for questions, feedback, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Actually,
oh, you're muted again. You unmuted and then remuted.
Okay, sorry. So what do you think about Neuralink, the development by Elon Musk and his people?
Well, I think just the things you'd imagine. It ought to be open source because it's going to be going to form part of your mind. It's very much part of your mind, isn't it? It's a bit more obvious when it's sitting next to the brain, like Robocop's modifications. But if it's closed source, then you're going to get a whole bunch of good intentions coming in there with people saying, oh, don't you think it would be really good if, in theory, blah, blah, blah. And you just can't, you're not going to be able to check what it's doing. The fundamental point here is that if it's not open source, it's not auditable. And all you get is somebody's promise that it's doing X, Y, and Z. You cannot check what it's doing.
Don't you think that it's pretty normal for a human mind to have certain parts of it inaccessible? Like if you think about memory, you cannot access all your memories at the same time. Sometimes you access them randomly. So I think it's a natural state for us to not be able to audit our entire mind. It's
natural to be imperfect at auditing. So some bits are very Some bits are easy to audit. You know, why am I in this room again? I've forgotten. I walked into a room, and then finally you remember, oh, I was looking for my keys. Some bits are difficult to audit, like you know, I've got slightly racist inclinations. Why do I have these racist inclinations? That can be very difficult to audit. You know, everyone says this who used to be a bit brain damaged, and then they just stop being racist. So you get scales of difficulty. And now right beyond the peak here, if I ask like, what is Zoom doing with your data? If it wants to encode things it's going to send out, it can encode with AES 256, symmetric encryption, or asymmetric encryption, or whatever, and you're not going to find out what it's sending out. It's just mathematically impossible.
Okay, so final thing, they did in China what they warned us about in the Netflix show that you mentioned earlier. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, you missed it again.
Yeah, the social credit system that works in China. What are your views on that?
Which is exactly what you would imagine they are. So it's good to hear that some of this theory is easy, but I'm afraid it's also stereotypical. Like, it's bad and it's very scary, and we should all be very worried. My main thing here is I wanted to point out the more subtle thing, because when somebody says there's a social credit system, oh my god, it's scary, that's obviously scary. So I'm more hoping to point out that we already have bits of this going on here, and these subtle pushes. For example, today, we apparently don't have any, there's no social credit system in Europe, but I wanted to be able to join the discussion for this chat, and so I had to bring up Facebook, which I didn't really want to do. But I have wanted to do things on Facebook, so okay, I went to make a profile, and now, you might not remember this if you've signed up 10 years ago, but now if you want Facebook, they ask for your email address and the password to your email address. They can verify it's a real email, which means if you have medical data in your email address, if you have, private history with other people, that's accessible to Facebook. And then after that, like I tried to put up a fake one, they noticed, and okay, there's my email address. Then they went for my photo. They said, that's not your face. We know what your face looks like. We've got AI looking for your face. We need a better picture. Can't put up this cartoon. So while that's not a full social credit score, and it's a lot smaller, it's still there. It's subtle and insidious. So we still have something akin to this slowly rising in Europe.
Okay, so we should just delete our accounts and never use internet and so on.
Oh, okay. That's the Stallman bit. Don't become Amish. Like, there's no use in saying everyone just delete your Facebook. You can't remove things. You can only replace them. So if you want Twitter, there is Mastodon there. It's a free and open source Twitter. If you want something like Facebook, there's Diaspora there. If you want to keep both accounts, you can keep both accounts. But for social goods, like it's bad to tell people, I will not associate with you and I will not be speaking with you, and I will never invite you to any social events unless you're on Facebook. If you're only on Facebook, then this is effectively what you tell people. You got a chat window? Oh, is this somebody else putting up a thing? Okay, we have a new comment. Is that in the Facebook chat thing? Has it been copied over to me? No. Okay, I was wondering which rules in society presuppose traditional vision of mind as something in your brain. I would say rules that's sort of bog standard science intuitions. Perhaps one rule would be the one against cheating during a test. If your phone is part of your extended mind, yes, absolutely. Then using it to check answers during the test should not be considered cheating. Yes, Chalmers raised this exact point. If you've always got a calculator next to you, then it shouldn't be considered cheating to have a calculator in the test. How would cheating look like in a world in which we got accustomed to the extended account of mind? Well, the good bit is it could be simpler. If there are no rules, then there's no cheating. The bad bit is it could be monstrously unfair. If I'm a very rich person, so I want to do this exam, and I hire a bunch of people with big graphics cards and big AI to help me out. I go, well, I've always been rich, and I've always had these, and I'm just going to pay for this service. And somebody else can't pay for the service, which means the mind is smaller. So there are some real dangers of being, if we just let loose with this, of just being horribly unmeritocratic. Or even worse, we say it's meritocratic because people with big graphics cards and lots of money are literally better people. They're more quality because they have these larger minds. So yeah, it looks like we may as well stunt people to the point where everyone gets roughly the same extensions. That's certainly easy when it comes to calculators. We can guarantee that everyone in the maths exam can have a calculator. We probably don't even need to hand them out. I'm sure everyone has a calculator in the pocket right now. Yep, looks like time's up, and I should wrap up. So
yeah, so thank you very much for your presentation and answering all the questions. Hope to see you next time.
You too. Later, guys. Thank you very much for having me.